Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I have been excited to have this event virtual so that people can make it. I know sometimes our in-person events are difficult to make it to. So today we have Elizabeth Oyer, the Department of Justice pardon attorney, with us to speak about their DOJ clemency application, which is the application you need to apply for clemency in the District of Columbia. So I will turn it over to her and let her give her presentation on their application process. And then after, I will speak about what the Clemency Board does in the district. And then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session to answer any questions anyone might have and questions that were submitted prior to the start. So I will turn it over to Ms. Oyer.
Great, thank you, Kimberly. And thanks to everyone who has joined today to learn more about clemency. My name is Liz Oyer. I work for the Department of Justice in the role of pardon attorney, and I will tell you a little bit more about what that means. I'm going to share my screen so that I can put a PowerPoint up, and let me know if you have any trouble seeing this. So the Office of the Pardon Attorney is situated within the Department of Justice. We're here where you see this arrow on our organization chart. And Kimberly, can you see the slideshow okay?
I can see it. It's a little bit small. Is there a way to zoom in a little?
I don't know. Not that I know of. So the Office of the Pardon Attorney reports directly to the Deputy Attorney General within the Department of Justice, and ultimately we are trusted with making clemency recommendations to the President. I want to talk a little bit about what clemency is and then what the clemency process federally looks like. Clemency is a presidential power under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. The Constitution essentially says that the president can grant clemency to whomever he chooses for any reason he chooses. There are two types of clemency. They are commutation of sentence and pardon after completion of sentence. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the different types of clemency are. And Kimberly, I'm getting a note that maybe people are having trouble seeing the slides.
Yes. Are you able to share it with me afterwards so I can send it out to anyone who might need it?
I can send you the PowerPoint now and maybe you'll be able to pull it up if that might be better. All right, I've just sent you the PowerPoint, and if you want to try sharing it, maybe it'll come up more clearly. But I'll just kind of walk through the presentation anyway. None of this is really essential that you see it on the screen. So the two main types of clemency are pardon after completion of sentence and a commutation of sentence. A commutation of sentence is essentially a reduction in sentence for an individual who's still incarcerated. So a commutation is the type of clemency that you would apply for if you are currently serving a sentence. A pardon after a completion of your sentence is essentially an act of forgiveness by the president. So if you have served your sentence and returned to the community and you're doing well, you could apply for a pardon, which would essentially be the president saying that you have been forgiven for the offense that you were convicted of. I'm going to talk a little bit about the eligibility and process for applying for both of these types of clemency. The President of the United States has the power to grant clemency to anyone who is convicted of an offense under the United States Code or the DC Code. So essentially anyone who has a federal conviction or a conviction under the laws of the District of Columbia can be pardoned by the president for their offense. Unfortunately, the mayor, who is the head of the government of DC, does not have the ability to grant pardons, only the president of the United States. So if you're a DC resident who was convicted under the DC code, you would apply to the president, currently President Biden, for clemency. On the commutation side, as I said before, anyone who is currently serving a sentence is eligible to apply for a reduction of their sentence. Typically, we see people seeking a reduction of their sentence of imprisonment, so shortening of their prison sentence, but you can also apply for other types of relief, including reduction of a fine, of a term of supervised release, or of a restitution judgment. To apply for commutation, generally, we look for a number of different things in the application. One thing that we look at in considering requests for commutation is the issue of sentencing disparity. So if an individual has been sentenced to a term that is longer than the sentence they would likely receive today under current law, that would be a factor that would get our attention and that would cause us to closely review their application for clemency. As many of you may know, there have been a lot of changes in federal sentencing laws since many of the individuals who apply for this type of relief were first sentenced, and we would look at how the law has changed to determine whether there is the type of sentencing disparity that might make someone a good candidate for commutation of their sentence. We also look at the issue of rehabilitation and good conduct since the time of sentencing. So one factor that we would take into consideration and one factor that you'd want to highlight in your application is what have you been doing since you were sentenced and how have you demonstrated rehabilitation? As part of our review process, we would get records from the Bureau of Prisons about programming completed and other accomplishments and take those into consideration in the clemency application process. And finally, we would look at what you plan to do upon release. So we ask in our revised clemency application, which has been published in the last few months, that you include a release plan that explains where you'll live, what you'll do to support yourself, sort of the basics after you complete serving your sentence. So all of those are questions that are asked in the commutation application, and I'll talk a little bit more about where to get the application and how to complete it, but these are just sort of the basics in terms of what we are looking for. And thank you for getting that slide up. The pardon application process is a little bit different because, as I mentioned, pardons are generally issued to people who have already completed serving their sentence and have returned to the community. And they're essentially an acknowledgement that you've been rehabilitated and you deserve forgiveness from the crime that you were convicted of. To be eligible for a pardon, again, you have to have been convicted either under federal law or under the DC code. There's an additional eligibility requirement, which is that you have to have been out of custody for at least 5 years. That does not mean 5 years off paper. It just means 5 years since you were released from prison, or if you were not sentenced to a term of imprisonment, 5 years since you were originally sentenced. So those are the basic eligibility requirements. In terms of what makes a good application for a pardon, there are a number of different factors, and I'll talk a little bit about those. One of the questions on the application will ask you to describe the offense that you were convicted of. It's generally helpful in the pardon application process if you accept responsibility for your conduct. That's not a requirement, but I will say that it's generally something that's helpful. It's helpful to include in the pardon application a statement that indicates acceptance of responsibility and some degree of remorse for the offense that happened in the past, and then a focus on who you are today. So we look for in the pardon application good post-sentencing conduct. We want to see that you're not likely, if you receive a pardon, to commit another crime or to end up in a situation like the one that ultimately you're seeking pardon for. So we're looking for things like employment, contributions to the community, to your family, etc. It does not need to be anything truly out of the realm of normal, but we're looking for indications that you have re-entered your community and you're a productive law-abiding citizen. You will have the opportunity in your pardon application to provide a statement of the reasons that you're seeking pardon. I call this your personal statement. That's a really important part of the application. We want to hear from you directly about why you're seeking a pardon and how it would benefit you. People have all different reasons for seeking pardon, and this is a question that requires you to dig deep and touch on sort of your personal reasons for doing this. Some people are seeking forgiveness, they're seeking validation through the pardon process. Others have more concrete reasons for seeking pardon, for example, to eliminate barriers to employment or obstacles to finding stable housing or to get restoration of certain civil rights. So there are a lot of different reasons, and this is an important part of the application to address your reasons for seeking pardon. And finally, the pardon application process requires you to provide character references. You'll be required to submit in support of your application references from at least 3 individuals who know you well and who are not blood relatives of yours. So these are an important piece of the application. We want to see that there are at least 3 people in the community who will vouch for you and say that you're somebody who is worthy of the president's forgiveness through pardon. All of the application materials are available on our website. So the first thing that you'll want to do if you're in the community and you're seeking a pardon is go to our website and download the lengthy application form for pardon and complete that form and sign it. There's a lot of questions on there that may require you to dig back into your history. We ask for things like prior addresses, prior employment, dating back 10 years. All of this is a required part of the pardon background investigation process. So we do ask for a lot of personal information, and it may take you some time to complete the application. Once you've completed the application, in the case of a pardon, you'll be required to get those 3 character references. Character references are not required to seek commutation of sentence. So if you have a family member who is incarcerated, who's seeking a reduction of their sentence, they do not need to have character references. They just need to complete the application form. In the case of in the case of commutations, the application form is available within the Bureau of Prisons. Any case manager or counselor in BOP should be able to provide a copy of the application form. And that form is much shorter and much simpler to fill out than the application for a pardon. In the case of commutations, letters of support are accepted, but they're not required. So if an individual has family members in the community who want to write in support of their application, that's perfectly appropriate, and those letters can be sent directly to my office, but it is not required to have those additional letters. The character references are only required for pardon applications. In terms of submitting the materials, they can either be mailed or emailed to my office. I've provided the information on the slide, both the mailing address and the email address. It's also available on our website. For individuals who are incarcerated, they should be able to submit their materials to their case manager, who can then send the materials on their behalf to my office so that we can open a file and begin. We have a lot of resources available on our website that can assist if you have questions about how to go through the application process. I've included on the next slide the address for our website, as well as a screenshot of one section of the website that shows some of the resources that we've got. We've got a lot of FAQs and things like that that you can look into if you have questions about the process. And ultimately, if you're not able to get an answer just looking at the materials on the website, you can always write to the office at the email address I provided on the previous slide, and we can help you to figure out an answer to your question. Once you submit the application to us, there's a review process that starts in our office with an investigation of the application. In the case of a commutation, a reduction of a prison sentence, we gather some documents from the Bureau of Prisons. We collect some court documents, including the pre-sentence report and some other basic materials. And once we have all of those documents assembled, we have a complete case file, we make a recommendation, and that recommendation then goes to the Deputy Attorney General. The Deputy Attorney General is the #2 official in the Department of Justice, and she oversees clemency. Once a recommendation is made to her, she can either agree with or disagree with the recommendation of my office. And in either event, the recommendation then goes to the president, who's the ultimate decision maker on every clemency application. Now, in the case of the pardon, there's a little bit more to the process. One of the required parts of the pardon process is a background investigation that's conducted by the FBI before anyone can be granted a pardon. So if you have applied and we are considering granting or recommending favorably your pardon application to the president, one of the requirements of the process is that the FBI conduct an investigation in which they would interview you, and they would also interview the individuals who you've provided as character references so that they can confirm your good character. They will run a background investigation to confirm that you don't have any new criminal convictions or things like that. And once that investigation is complete, the recommendation can be finalized and ultimately go to the president. So that's generally how the review process works. The review process for pardons, because of the background investigation requirement, can be lengthier generally than the review process for commutation applications. If you have questions about the status of your case, we do have a feature on our website that allows you to look up the status of your case. You can look it up by either name, case number, or BOP register number. It will give you information about whether your case is open, closed, granted, denied. We can't tell you the specifics of how far along in our review process your case is, but we can tell you whether your case remains active or whether a decision has been reached. We also generally very promptly send you a notification, whether you're incarcerated or not, of any decision that has been reached in your case. If your clemency application is denied, you can always reapply. And sometimes by reapplying, you can put yourself in a better position to be considered favorably by highlighting things that have changed or new accomplishments that you've made since you submitted your original application. If you have been waiting a while to hear from us, that generally means that your application is still under review. If there's an update that you'd like to provide to us, you're welcome to send us a letter or an email, which we can add to your case file. We will look at any new information you send us and incorporate it into the recommendation in your case and ensure that our recommendation is based on the most updated information that you have provided to us. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions that folks might have about how the application process works. I also want to just reiterate that if you have questions that are specific to your situation and you cannot find an answer on our website, we do find that email is the best way to be able to respond to inquiries. We have a phone number on our website as well, but it's better to email. You'll get a quicker response than if you call. The email address is here, and we are here as a resource to be able to provide any assistance that you may be seeking in your clemency application process.
Thank you. I did see that there were some questions that popped up on the chat. And we also will have a question and answer portion at the end. Someone was asking if there's currently a backlog for pardons.
A backlog for, the pardon application review process takes quite a bit of time generally, so it's a lengthy process. I'm not sure what is meant by the question of whether there's a backlog, but I will say that there are a lot of people who have submitted applications quite some time ago who have not yet received a decision on their application.
And then, does this also help with concealing DV charges that have occurred over 5 years ago? I think that's more of a specific question, but.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question. This is different from expungement, if that's the question. A pardon is essentially forgiveness for an offense that you've committed, but it does not, unfortunately, expunge the conviction from your record. So what would happen if you're granted a pardon is the fact of your pardon would be reported to the criminal databases managed by the FBI and other law enforcement and added to your record so that if someone were to run a criminal background check, it would indicate that your conviction was pardoned, but it would not be removed from your record in the way of expungement.
Okay, great. And I do see more questions, but I will get to those in the question and answer portion. I'm just going to go over now a little bit more about the DC Clemency Board and what our application is about. And Ms. Oyer did go over a lot of what a pardon and a commutation, what they are. So I will stick to more of the specifics. Oh, wrong screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this time. So what is clemency? So as Ms. Oyer has talked about, a commutation is a reduction in sentence, and a pardon would be more of a forgiveness. Both of those in the District of Columbia are handled by the DOJ Pardon Attorney's Office and decided by the president, so not by the mayor. Because DC does not have statehood and does not have this power, the council did create the Clemency Board, which I am staff director to. It's supported by the Mayor's Office of General Counsel. It was established in 2018 with the legal authority to grant a recommendation letter on behalf of a person who is convicted of DC code offenses. This is something that would supplement your application to the Pardon Attorney's Office for clemency. So it's not something where you only apply to the Clemency Board and the clemency process will go through for you. In order for us to send a letter of recommendation, you do need to have an application that has been filed with the Pardon Attorney's Office to be considered. And so when and if the board decides to send a letter of recommendation, it would be sent to Ms. Oyer's office as well as the president to supplement your application when they're considering whether or not to grant your application for clemency. Again, because the district is not a state, the mayor does not have the authority to grant clemency, and the Clemency Board does not as well. So you will need to apply and file an application with the Office of the Pardon Attorney. So once the Clemency Board gets your application and it's accepted as being an eligible application for either a pardon or a commutation letter of recommendation, we will then have to send all the releases that you sign out to all the agencies that have your background information. So this includes the Bureau of Prisons, the Court Supervision Program, the Superior Court, who would have all your court records about your case that you're applying for, and any other agencies like the Metro Police Department who have information about your case. That can take some time. We send those releases and requests out. Sometimes we have to make a Freedom of Information Act request to get that information, and that can take months at a time. So you can always reach out to us to ask us the status of your consideration for letter of recommendation, but sometimes we just don't know when we're going to get that information back to be able to move forward on the decision. Once we get all of that information, the board will then make a decision on whether or not to hold a hearing to get additional information from the applicant or witnesses or anyone who is coming forward as a reference for the applicant. After the hearing, the board will then make a decision on whether or not it's granting the request for a letter of recommendation. If granted, the letter of recommendation, again, will be sent to the Pardon Attorney's Office and the president. Anyone whose application has been denied will receive a notice. And that denial process can happen anytime in the process. So let's say you send in your application, we start gathering documents, and then it turns out we find out that you're actually not eligible or something has changed to change your eligibility status. We would notify you by letter to let you know that that has happened. So we have board members. We try to make sure that it's as well-rounded as possible. So we have a returning citizen member, a mental health professional, a member with victim rights experience, a member of the District Columbia Bar, and then we have a district resident who is a community member. From there, we have designees, one from the district's attorney general office, the one from council, and then a designee from the public defender's service, and then someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. So we do try to make sure that the board members who are reviewing your applications and making these decisions are well-rounded in their experiences, and to make sure that there is a holistic view. So to be eligible for a letter of recommendation, it has to be a DC code offense. Usually the easiest way to figure out if that's what you have is that you were prosecuted in Superior Court in DC, not federal court. And then the remainder of the requirements are just that you have no other form of judicial or administrative relief available. And for pardon specifically, you have to wait 5 years after release, which is the same as the DOJ's eligibility requirements. What really helps with your application for commutations is that you really talk in your statement about what your goals are in returning to the community and what you feel that you can now contribute to the community after serving a portion of your sentence. For pardons, it's about your rehabilitation. What have you done since you've been released? What are your goals to contribute to the community? What has your life been like since you left custody or incarceration? The board also gives special consideration to anyone who's terminally ill, elderly, who no longer presents a danger to the community, and any applicants who are convicted under a sentencing scheme, such as a mandatory minimum, that was changed after you were convicted to provide for a less severe penalty. So they'll give special consideration to that. It doesn't mean that you're automatically granted a letter of recommendation or anything like that. So to apply for a letter of recommendation, you can do that on our website. You can email me for a PDF application, and then you can mail that in or email it to me. And if you need us to mail you a paper application to fill out, you can always send us an email or a phone call, and we will mail those to you. You can also send us requests by mail, and we'll mail those out to you. But the easiest way to access that is to either use the online portal to fill the application out online, or to download the PDF version of it from our website. This is our contact information. You can reach out at any time. I'm happy to answer your questions as much as I can. Some of the questions that I do get require an attorney to answer them for you, and I can't give legal advice to anyone who's asking. So I will sometimes refer you to resources like the UDC Law School Clinic. They will help applicants with clemency applications, both the DOJ portion of the application and our Clemency Board portion of the application. So you can always reach out to them. And there are other resources within the city that can help you with that as well. Or you can reach out to your public defender to see if they know anyone who can help you. But feel free to reach out to me first, and I'm happy to send those resources to anyone who may need them. And you can always go to our website for any information on meetings or events such as this. So I see that we got some more questions. And so that is our portion of it for the Clemency Board. But again, just as a reminder, you do have to apply for clemency with the DOJ office because our office and board does not have the authority to grant clemency. Okay, so I guess I will start going through the questions and we'll see what we can answer. How many pardons were signed by President Biden last year and in the DC area? That information is on the DOJ website, I believe, right?
Yeah, President Biden has granted 126 individual clemencies. The majority of them thus far have been commutations rather than pardons. And there are a number of folks from the DC area who have received them. We are actually having a great event at DOJ on Friday that's going to be live streamed for anyone who wants to tune in. And we're going to be highlighting some of the individuals who have received clemency recently from President Biden, including at least one individual who is from the DC area. So please feel free to tune in and watch that. The event will be live streamed on the DOJ website. So it's just doj.gov/live, and you can watch the event to learn more.
That's great. And just as a note to everyone, it is Second Chance Month. So there are a lot of these types of events going on this month if you want to watch out for them. The next question is, and I'm going to reframe the question a little bit, but if you were incarcerated for more than 10 years, what would you put in the employment history portion of the application?
So generally in the pardon application, we ask for information that goes back either 10 years or to the date that you were released from the community. To be eligible, you'll have at least presumably 5 years of time in the community, and you can put all of the information that applies from that 5-year time period if you have not been out longer than that. If you've been out 10 years, then we'll ask you to go back 10 years and provide us with work, residence, et cetera, for the last 10 years.
Great. And our Clemency Board application doesn't require that. And then the next question is where to get the application. So you can get them, the Clemency Board application and the pardon attorney's application from our websites. They both should be able to be downloaded in PDF form and submitted either by mail or email. The next question is, so this is actually a question that I get a lot as well, about submitting supplemental paperwork while your application is pending. If someone submits additional information while your application is pending, does that delay a decision?
Yeah, it in our process, it does not. So we will move your case forward as quickly as we can. And if we get a supplement, we'll generally very quickly incorporate whatever new information you've provided into our analysis, and it will not delay the review of your application at all. Because the process can be lengthy, I do encourage folks to submit supplements if they have new information to share. I would strongly encourage you to do that if your application has been pending for a while and you haven't received a decision.
And I would second that note. We would obviously want to know if there's anything new going on and anything, any updates that would help to support your application. It won't delay on our end either. Another question about applications. I'm not sure I understand this question, but I will try. If you have a 60-month supervised release, are you saying you have to wait until the 5 years is over to submit an application? So I guess, when does the 5 years start once you're released from custody?
So if you are sentenced to prison, your 5 years starts from the day that you're released. It does not matter how long your term of supervised release is. It goes off of the date that you're released. If you are not sentenced to prison, for example, if you were to get a 5-year sentence of probation, the 5 years runs from the date of your sentencing. So the date the court imposes your sentence.
Okay, great. And our requirement is the same to stay consistent with that application. There are some people asking if they can call to ask some questions. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of both of our offices. And then for me, at least when I get the questions, I try to make sure it's something that I can answer. And again, if it's not, and you need an attorney to help you, I would refer you to that. And I believe, Ms. Oyer, you said email is the best way to get a hold of your office as well.
Yeah, if you have questions about the application process, I would strongly encourage anybody who has internet access to review our website, because there's a lot of information out there that should provide a lot of insight into the process and how it works. If your question is not answered after looking at our website, definitely send us an email and someone can be in touch. If we need to contact you back by phone to talk through something, we can do that. But we generally are most responsive and most quickly responsive by email. I also just want to flag that you don't need an attorney to successfully get through the clemency application process. It, of course, may be helpful to have somebody who's an expert advising you, but it is absolutely not necessary. About 90% of the folks who apply for clemency do not have an attorney representing them in that process, perhaps more than 90%. And the same holds true with the folks who ultimately get clemency. The overwhelming majority of them are not represented by an attorney in that process. We're doing a lot of work right now to try to simplify our application forms. We've already finished that with our commutation application, and we're close to being done with that with our pardon application to try to make it easier for people to complete the questions without the help of an attorney. But definitely do not feel like if you do not have an attorney, you can't do this on your own. You absolutely 100% can.
This might be more of a question for me, but how many ways can you clear your record in DC? Clearing your record, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's not exactly that a pardon would clear your record or a commutation, but there is also an option to record seal if that's what you're looking for, where people look into your history and you don't want them to see it. You could always apply with the court to seal your record, or apply for clemency to see if you can get a pardon, which is getting it. It's not exactly going to clear your record, if that makes sense. It would be, my understanding of it at least, is that it makes it appear as if your conviction has been forgiven. So it may still show up on your record, but might be listed as pardoned. We don't have expungements in DC though, so just to be clear. Okay, there were some other pre-submitted questions. I will pull up. And some of them I think we've already answered. If you are in custody with the Bureau of Prisons, how do you communicate with the DOJ Pardon Office?
So the best way to do that is through your case manager. All of the case managers have copies of the clemency application form, and they also have information from my office about what materials we need from them to be able to review your application. So they are familiar with what they need to send us, and what we ask them to send us is the judgment in your case, the pre-sentence report, a recent progress report, and reports related to the programming that you have completed and other things that you've done while incarcerated. So we routinely get all of that from case managers, and your case manager should be able to provide you with all the information that you need to submit an application and to get updated on the status of your application.
Okay, great. This is a question that was submitted, and I get this question often about whether or not you can apply for clemency if you're a permanent resident, and if immigration status affects your eligibility to apply.
No, yeah, anybody can apply regardless of immigration status. Sometimes people apply for pardon because receiving a pardon would help them to improve their immigration status. It might help them to avoid certain immigration consequences. So that's a common reason for applying for pardon, and it's a very valid reason for applying for pardon. Citizenship or permanent residency is not a requirement to apply for either commutation or pardon.
Great. And are hearings held on all applications?
We don't hold any hearings at DOJ, so I'm not sure how the DC board's process works, but there are no hearings held in the Department of Justice on clemency.
For our board, we don't hold hearings on every application, but the Clemency Board makes that decision once reviewing the application. And I believe a lot of these questions were covered already during our presentations. Does an application with the Clemency Board affect the status of my application with the DOJ? And I think the fast answer to that is no. They're two parallel processes, so they do not affect each other.
Yeah, I would advise anybody who is considering applying to go ahead and submit your application to the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and not to wait to do that, because our review process can be lengthy. If you're able to then get a recommendation letter from the DC Clemency Board, we can add that to your case file, but you don't need to wait on that or anything before you submit your application. I would encourage everybody to go ahead and get your application submitted so that we can get the review process started. And I also see in the chat that someone has asked, this is an important question, someone has asked whether someone who's incarcerated can trust that their case manager will submit information on their behalf. I would say yes, because we do get that information all the time routinely from case managers within the Bureau of Prisons. They're required to send it to us, and we do receive it generally pretty quickly. So I don't have concerns about that based on my experience, but if an individual has reason to be concerned about that, they can absolutely send us their materials directly as well. They can send them to us through regular mail, or they can ask a family member in the community to send something on their behalf. So we can receive it that way as well.
That is an important question. And just to piggyback off what Ms. Oyer was saying before, I would highly recommend that you apply to their office before you apply to ours. Because like we've said before, it's a supplement to your application to the DOJ. Okay, and then are there any charges that are excluded from clemency consideration?
For our purposes, no. Anyone can be considered for clemency. Historically, the majority of clemencies that have been granted in recent years have been to individuals with convictions for drug offenses, and in part that's because the drug sentencing laws have changed dramatically in certain ways on the federal level. But we get applications involving all different types of charges. Anyone can be considered. There's no type of charge that's not eligible to be considered for clemency.
Okay, great. And that was the last one I had that was submitted. I don't think one question is about getting more detailed updates on your application. At least on our end on the board, we're not always able to give you a more detailed update other than just that we're waiting to receive information back from our requests for information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the case with the DOJ process as well. We can tell you if your application remains pending or if it has been closed, either because it's been granted or it's been denied, but we cannot tell you beyond that where specifically your application is in the review process. Unfortunately, a lot of people ask that, and I know it's frustrating because it can be a lengthy period of time that you may have to wait to get a decision. But if you haven't heard anything from us, it's because your application remains under review and it's something that we are actively still considering.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand the question. Does this cover any specific charge or a person's background period? There is a specific question about distribution for PCP, and it's a felony charge. Will this qualify? If it's a DC code offense, it will qualify for the board. And my understanding is federal offenses as well for the clemency application.
Yeah, that's right. And regarding the charges or a person's background generally, if the question is whether a pardon applies to any conviction that you have on your record, the answer is no. You have to apply separately for any for each charge. So you could fill out one application if you have multiple convictions, and you could ask for pardon from multiple convictions, but it would have to be, pardons are granted for specific cases. So it wouldn't just clear your background entirely. It would apply to whichever cases you have sought pardon in.
It's actually a great point. Okay, yeah, so any DC code offenses, you can apply to the board for a letter of recommendation, and for clemency would go through the DOJ office. So I think that wraps up any of the pending questions we have now in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today to give this information. I know it's helpful to the community and to people to be able to have this interactive experience of being able to ask these questions and get more information. And again, you can reach out to both of our offices via email or by phone and look at the DOJ website to get more information. Our Clemency Board website isn't as fancy yet, but we are working on it and doing our best to get more information on there. So feel free to email me if you have any more questions. But thank you, Ms. Oyer, for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I just want to say to everyone who's participating, we really want to encourage more folks from DC to apply. I'd really like to see more DC residents successfully get through this process. So please do submit those applications, reach out with questions if you have them. We want to be a resource to make the application process as easy to understand as possible. And if you can't find a question answered on our website, reach out by email. I really want to make sure that folks are able to benefit from this type of relief, especially folks in the District of Columbia. So please do apply and be in touch if we can help.
And I know the DC residents appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I've stopped the webcast.